fabled heat, where magic meets desire. Subscribe to ignite the fantasy.
The long-form story. Chapter 1, The Inciting Incident. The musty air of the abandoned warehouse clung to my skin like a second layer of clothing, thick with the scent of old oil and decay. Moonlight filtered through the broken windows, casting jagged shadows across the concrete floor. I'd been tracking a lead on the cult for weeks, ever since they'd tried to sacrifice another innocent woman in some twisted ritual to their so-called great god. My name is Ethan Blackwood, private investigator, not the kind that deals with cheating spouses or missing cats. The kind that gets called when things go bump in the night, when the police hit walls they can't see through, when the supernatural bleeds into the mundane world. And right now, I was about to walk into the heart of something that made my skin crawl. The cultists had been growing bolder, their symbols appearing in more public places, carved into trees in city parks, spray-painted on abandoned buildings, burned into the grass of suburban lawns. They believed they were ushering in a new age, that their god demanded blood sacrifice to tear open the veil between worlds. I'd seen what happened when they succeeded before. It wasn't pretty. I crept along the wall, my hand resting on the butt of my revolver. Silver bullets, just in case whatever they were summoning wasn't entirely human. The warehouse stretched out before me, cavernous and dark, but I could hear them now, chanting. The words were in some ancient language I didn't recognize, but the rhythm sent chills down my spine. There in the center of the room stood a circle of hooded figures, 13 of them, their backs to me as they faced a massive stone altar, and on that altar, my breath caught in my throat. The woman was bound with silver chains, her wrists and ankles secured to the corners of the stone. She was beautiful in a way that made my chest tighten, long dark hair spread out beneath her like a fan, skin pale in the moonlight, lips parted as she struggled against her bonds. But it wasn't just her beauty that struck me, it was the familiarity. I'd seen her before, not in my cases, not in my investigations, in my bed, one night a year ago when I'd been drowning my sorrows in a dive bar downtown. She'd walked in like she owned the place, all confidence and mystery, and we'd spent one perfect, passionate night together before she disappeared without a trace. Now here she was, about to be sacrificed by a cult I'd been hunting. The chanting reached a fever pitch, and one of the cultists stepped forward. He was taller than the others, his robes more ornate, a silver pendant hanging around his neck that caught the moonlight. He raised his hands, and the chanting stopped. "You who stand at the threshold," he intoned, his voice echoing through the warehouse, "you who carry the blood of the old ones, you shall be sacrificed to our great god." My blood ran cold. They knew who she was, not just some random victim. They'd targeted her specifically. The cultist reached into his robes and pulled out a small stone tablet covered in glowing runes. He activated it with a word I couldn't quite hear, and the air around the altar began to shimmer. Heat radiated outward, and the woman on the altar started screaming. Then the flames appeared. They didn't burn her, they formed a ring around the altar, rising higher and higher until they obscured her completely. The cultists fell to their knees, continuing their chanting, and I realized with growing horror that whatever they were trying to summon was about to break through. I drew my gun, stepping out from the shadows. "Stop right there." The cultists turned as one, their hoods falling back to reveal faces that were human but wrong, eyes too wide, mouth stretched in unnatural smiles, skin that seemed to ripple and change. They weren't just cultists, they were something else entirely. And then the flames parted. The woman from the altar stood there, unharmed but furious, her eyes blazing with a power I'd never seen before. She was still in the same dress she'd been wearing, still bound by the silver chains, but something about her had changed. She looked at me, recognition flashing across her face, and then her gaze shifted to the cultists. "You have got to be kidding me," she said, her voice dripping with sarcasm. "After a year of hiding, I get sacrificed by the same idiots who have been hunting me, really?" The cultist leader's eyes widened. "The sacrifice, it's not working." "Oh, it's working," she said with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Just not the way you thought." And then she moved. Chapter 2, The Rising Action. Silver chains snapped like thread as she flexed her arms, the metal crumbling to dust. The cultists scrambled backward, their chanting dissolving into panicked shouts. I kept my gun trained on the leader, but my mind was reeling. What was she? What kind of power could destroy silver chains with a thought? She stepped out of the circle of flames, which immediately extinguished as if they'd never existed. The warehouse plunged back into darkness, save for the moonlight streaming through the windows. The cultists were on their feet now, drawing weapons, knives, ceremonial daggers, even what looked like a gun or two. "Ethan," she said, and my name on her lips sent a jolt through me. "A little help here." I didn't hesitate. I fired at the closest cultist, the silver bullet catching him in the shoulder. He screamed, not in pain but in rage, and the flesh around the wound began to bubble and reform. Whatever they weren't human anymore. The woman, I needed to know her name, needed to understand what was happening, moved with a grace that was almost inhuman. She caught a cultist's arm as he swung a knife at her, twisted, and the man's arm snapped like a twig. Another tried to grab her from behind, and she drove her elbow into his solar plexus with a force that sent him flying across the room. I kept firing, trying to cover her, trying to process the fact that the woman I'd slept with a year ago was apparently some kind of supernatural being with combat skills that would make a Navy SEAL jealous. "Behind you," I shouted as another cultist lunged at her with a silver blade. She spun, caught his wrist, and with a move that was pure poetry, she disarmed him and slammed him face first into the concrete. The sound of his nose breaking was sickening. "They're not going to stop," she said, breathing hard as she backed up toward me. "Whatever they summoned with that ritual, it's still coming." I risked a glance at the altar. The stone was glowing now, runes pulsing with an angry red light. Whatever had been trying to break through was getting impatient. "We need to get out of here," I said, grabbing her arm. Her skin was warm, her pulse racing beneath my fingers. "Can you walk?" She gave me a look that was pure incredulity. "I can do more than walk." We ran for the nearest exit, cultists on our heels. I could hear them crashing through the debris behind us, their footsteps uneven, their breathing too loud. Whatever magic they'd used to transform themselves, it hadn't made them faster or stronger, just more aggressive, more dangerous. The door burst open under our combined weight, and we stumbled out into the night. The air was cool and fresh after the oppressive atmosphere of the warehouse, and for a moment I just stood there, trying to catch my breath. Then the cultists came pouring out after us. "We can't fight them all," I said, already calculating our odds. "We need to split up, draw them away from." "Why then?" I turned to look at her and my words died in my throat. She was standing there in the moonlight, her dress torn, her hair wild around her face, and she looked at me with eyes that seemed to see right through to my soul. "You don't remember, do you?" she asked softly. "Remember what?" She took a step closer and I could smell her now, something floral and exotic with an undertone that made my head spin. "What happened after we met, what you are, what I am." I shook my head, confused and more than a little frightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." She reached out, her fingers brushing my cheek with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence we'd just survived. "You will, when the time comes, but right now, we have bigger problems." I heard it then, a sound like tearing metal, like reality itself being ripped open. I turned back toward the warehouse just as a portal burst into existence where the door had been. It was swirling with colors that hurt to look at, with shapes that made no sense, and from its depths emerged something that defied description. It was massive, for one thing, towering over the cultists who were now prostrating themselves before it. It had too many limbs, or maybe not enough, and its skin, if that's what it was, seemed to be made of darkness given form. Eyes, dozens of them, opened across its surface, all of them fixed on us. "Oh shit," I whispered. The woman beside me squared her shoulders. "That's new." "New, that's a goddamn eldritch abomination." She gave me a look that was almost fond. "You always did have a way with words." Then she stepped forward, placing herself between me and the creature. "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, don't let them take you." "Take me where?" But she was already moving, and I realized with growing horror that she wasn't running away. She was running toward the creature, her hands glowing with an energy I couldn't identify. "Ethan," she called over her shoulder, "when I give you the signal, run. Don't look back, don't stop until you're somewhere safe." "And where's that?" She smiled, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "With me." Then she charged the creature, and all hell broke loose. Chapter 3, the climax and cliffhanger. The creature's limbs, tentacles, arms, lashed out at her, moving with a speed that was hypnotic. She dodged the first few, her movements fluid and precise, but then one caught her across the chest and sent her flying. I heard her grunt in pain as she hit the ground, rolling to absorb the impact. I raised my gun, firing at the creature's eyes. The bullets passed through it like it was made of smoke, and I realized with growing despair that conventional weapons weren't going to work here. The woman was back on her feet, her dress torn, blood trickling from a cut on her forehead. She was breathing hard, but her eyes were still blazing with determination. She raised her hands, and the air around her began to shimmer with the same energy that had destroyed the silver chains. "Ethan," she shouted, "now." I didn't know what she meant, but I trusted her. I turned and ran, my feet pounding against the pavement, my lungs burning in the cool night air. Behind me I heard the sounds of battle, screams, crashes, the tearing of metal and stone. The creature was roaring now, a sound that seemed to shake the very foundations of the earth. I didn't look back, I couldn't, I just ran, my mind racing with questions I didn't have answers to. Who was she? What was she? Why had we met a year ago, and why had she disappeared? And most importantly, why had the cult targeted her? I was so focused on running that I didn't see the figure step out of the shadows in front of me until it was too late. I tried to swerve, but my foot caught on a piece of debris, and I went down hard. Pain exploded through my shoulder as I hit the ground, and I rolled, coming up in a crouch with my gun drawn. It was one of the cultists. He was different from the others. His robes were cleaner, his face more composed. He looked down at me with an expression that was almost pitying. "You shouldn't have interfered," he said softly. "The great God demands sacrifice, and you, Ethan Blackwood, have been chosen." I fired, the bullet caught him in the chest, and for a moment I thought it had worked. Then he smiled, and the wound began to close. "You can't stop what's coming," he said, taking a step toward me. "The veil is thinning, the old ones are returning, and when they do, you'll wish you'd never been born." I scrambled backward, my back hitting a wall. I was trapped, out of options, out of time. The cultist raised his hand, and I saw something glowing in his palm, another rune, another spell. But before he could activate it, something slammed into him from the side with enough force to send him flying. I heard the crunch of breaking bones, and then the cultist was still. I looked up, and there she was, the woman from the warehouse, her dress in tatters, her face covered in blood and dirt, but her eyes still blazing with that same otherworldly light. "Run," she said again, but this time her voice was different, deeper, more resonant. "Run, Ethan Blackwood, and remember." "Remember what?" She took a step closer, and I could smell her now, something floral and exotic, with an undertone that made my head spin. "What happened after we met, what you are, what I am." I shook my head, confused and more than a little frightened. "I don't know what you're talking about." She reached out, her fingers brushing my cheek with a gentleness that contrasted sharply with the violence we'd just survived. "You will, when the time comes, but right now, we have bigger problems." I heard it then, a sound like tearing metal, like reality itself being ripped open. I turned back toward the warehouse just as a portal burst into existence where the door had been. It was swirling with colors that hurt to look at, with shapes that made no sense, and from its depths emerged something that defied description. It was massive, for one thing, towering over the cultists who were now prostrating themselves before it. It had too many limbs, or maybe not enough, and its skin, if that's what it was, seemed to be made of darkness given form. Eyes, dozens of them, opened across its surface, all of them fixed on us. "Oh shit," I whispered. The woman beside me squared her shoulders. "That's new." "New, that's a goddamn eldritch abomination." She gave me a look that was almost fond. "You always did have a way with words." Then she stepped forward, placing herself between me and the creature. "Stay behind me. Whatever happens, don't let them take you." "Take me where?" But she was already moving, and I realized with growing horror that she wasn't running away. She was running toward the creature, her hands glowing with an energy I couldn't identify. "Ethan," she called over her shoulder, "when I give you the signal, run. Don't look back, don't stop until you're somewhere safe." "And where's that?" She smiled, and it was the most beautiful and terrifying thing I'd ever seen. "With me." Then she charged the creature, and all hell broke loose.